Why the rest of the NBA is scared of the Toronto Raptors. After losing Kawhi Leonard, the Raptors did a really nice job in building up their young core and their young assets and turned themselves into a legitimate playoff team last year, and this season I think they're going to be even better. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy Sports, I make opinionative NBA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. I also want to quickly mention that I recently started up an MMA channel, and if you guys are interested in that, the link will be in the description. But anyways, let's get into it. The Toronto Raptors have been a really good team for a really long time at this point, and it really started during the true emergence of both Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan in Toronto. And during their run, they were a team that made the playoffs each and every season and had a legitimate chance to contend in the Eastern Conference, but unfortunately for them, they weren't able to have all that much success in the playoffs. But either way, they were certainly a team that did make the playoffs at the very least each and every year. But after it became pretty clear that the Raptors weren't going to win a championship with those two guys in Kyle Lowry and DeMar DeRozan, the Raptors front office and Masai Ujiri specifically did a really nice job at pivoting away from DeMar DeRozan and trading for Kawhi Leonard, and of course once they brought him in, they won an NBA championship in the first season that he was there. Now unfortunately for Toronto, he ended up leaving, but the point that I'm trying to make with that is the Raptors front office knows what they're doing at this point and have shown the ability to make great decisions either in the draft, the trade market, or free agency time in and time again. And even after losing a franchise guy like Kawhi Leonard, who you just won an NBA championship with, the Raptors did a really nice job at rebuilding, or retooling I should say, the roster in about a season or two until they got to the point where they were at last year, where they were a legitimate playoff team. And they were able to do so in drafting effectively, like drafting a guy like Scottie Barnes, who's turned into a very good player for the Raptors, while also making good decisions in the trade market, free agency, and developing the young talent they already had on the roster. And talent development is something that's somewhat overlooked and something that a lot of teams do struggle with. But when you look around the NBA and you talk about the best teams in the NBA, you talk about the Golden State Warriors, Miami Heat, Boston Celtics, even the San Antonio Spurs, who aren't good now, but what all those teams have in common is they're all very good at talent development. And the reason why that's important is you can improve your team without actually making any deals or signings in free agency, and without even drafting any new players. And when you look at the Raptors and you talk about guys like Fred VanVleet, who is an undrafted guy and got to the point where he's at today at an all-star level player, or even a guy in Pascal Siakam, who when he was drafted, he wasn't necessarily seen as a really good player, and he got to the point last year or 2 seasons ago where he was an all-star, and although he's somewhat regressed, I would still say he's close to an all-star type guy. Basically, the point that I'm trying to make is a lot of the players that the Raptors drafted themselves got to the point where they're at today, in part due to the fact that the Raptors are very good at talent development. But now let's get into the question of the video, which is why I think the rest of the NBA may be scared of the Raptors this season. So there's a couple different reasons for why I think so, and one of the first things that I want to touch upon is whether or not they're able to acquire Kevin Durant. So of course, as most of us know at this point, KD requested a trade a little while back from the Brooklyn Nets, and there's been a bunch of teams that of course are interested in KD, and the Raptors were included in that list. So I guess there's a potential the Raptors could acquire Kevin Durant, and if that were to be the case, I think they would be legitimate championship contenders at that point, and probably championship favorites depending on what they would need to give up. But with that being said, I don't think Kevin Durant is going to get traded due to the fact that the Nets are asking for a ton in exchange for KD, and it seems like no team in the NBA is willing to go that high on their ask. But one thing that I will say is if the season starts and KD is just so unhappy in Brooklyn that he decides to actually sit out for the entire year until he gets traded, then at that point I would say it's much more likely that he would actually get dealt. But until that happens, I really don't see the Nets trading away Kevin Durant. But starting with the first main reason why I think the Raptors are going to scare a lot of teams next season is just due to the roster they currently have. When you look at their roster, the Raptors have done a really nice job at not only getting higher level players like Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam, who are both very close to all-star level players, but they also have a very well-balanced roster as well. You talk about a guy like Scottie Barnes, who isn't necessarily an all-star level guy, but he is a player that provides a ton for the Raptors on both sides of the court, and he's certainly a huge reason for why they were a really good team last year. And of course, he could be an all-star level player in the future, and I personally expect him to be. You talk about a guy in OG Anunoby, who's somewhat similar in the sense that he's also a two-way player. You talk about Gary Trent, who has a capability of putting up 25 points whenever he wants. And even besides those players, they just have a lot of other guys that fit in very nicely together. And I would just say the Raptors have done a really nice job at building their team within. They haven't necessarily looked to mortgage their future and trade away a bunch of draft picks and young players for a superstar. They haven't necessarily looked to trade away some of their younger guys to create cap space and sign a superstar in free agency. They've just done a really nice job at drafting effectively, developing the young talent they already have, making some nice trades at the trade deadline, and they eventually got to the point where they're at now, where they're a legitimate playoff contender. And if they continue to go on this trajectory, I think they would be legitimate championship contenders in the near future. Now, the next reason why I think the rest of the NBA could be scared of the Raptors next season is how well Toronto is coached. They do a really nice job at running crisp offensive sets while also playing extremely hard on the defensive side of the court as well, and they do that each and every night. And the way that the Raptors are coached kind of reminds me of how the San Antonio Spurs are coached and how they play year in and year out, just in the sense that they run crisp offensive sets and play very hard on the defensive side of the court each and every night as well. And if you're a team in the Eastern Conference that doesn't necessarily have the most talent, but you're well coached and play hard each and every night, you can easily win around 40 to 44 games, and that would probably land you the 7th or 8th seed in the Eastern Conference. But if you're a team like the Toronto Raptors are, that actually have a lot of talent on the roster, but you also play very hard on both sides of the court each and every night, now you're talking about a team that could be very high in the Eastern Conference standings. And at this point, I would expect Toronto to be a top 4 team in the East next year, or at the very least a top 5 team. But even besides the regular season, when you're talking about a team like that plays extremely hard and has the talent level that the Raptors do have, now you're also talking about a very difficult team to beat in the playoffs as well. So I think no matter who they play in the playoffs, they would be a very difficult team to beat as currently constructed. But overall, even though I do think the Raptors are going to be a really good team next season, I don't necessarily think they're going to win the championship. I just think it's a little too early for them. But the great thing about the Raptors is they are a very young team, so you would expect a team like this to only improve as the seasons do progress. And if they were able to acquire a superstar down the line in free agency without needing to trade away some of their younger guys to create cap space, that would just make this team that much more dangerous. Or if they were somehow able to trade for a superstar without giving up a lot of their young talent, that would also, of course, make their team a lot more dangerous, depending on who the superstar is. But no matter what direction the Raptors decide to go in, I think they're just going to continuously get better. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think the Raptors are going to be a scary team for the rest of the NBA this season, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these 2 videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out, guys.